The key opened the door, but it wasn't the door that made the dog freeze. Bruno went completely still, no bark, no movement, just staring at the floor like something underneath was breathing. Then Daniel heard it too. Not loud, just a faint metallic shift, like something sliding into place where no one had touched in years. So why did it feel like they weren't the first ones to open it? What do you think is hidden under that cabin? The lawyer's office smelled faintly of paper and stale coffee, the kind that had been sitting too long on a hot plate somewhere out of sight. Daniel Hayes sat in a straight-backed chair that creaked if he shifted even slightly, so he didn't. His spine stayed rigid, shoulders squared, hands resting flat on his thighs, exactly how he'd sat during briefings in a place half a world away. He kept his eyes moving, but not too much. A habit. Clock on the wall, window, door, back to the table. Never fixate, never relax. Across from him, his brother's family spoke in low, controlled voices, but none of it was meant for him. Not really. Papers shuffled. A pen tapped twice. Someone cleared their throat like they were about to say something important, but it never came. Bruno lay at Daniel's feet, a large German shepherd with a coat that had once been darker. The dog didn't sleep. His head rested on his paws, but his ears shifted at every small change in the room. The scrape of a chair, the click of a pen, the tightening in a voice. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and continued reading from the will. The house on Pine Creek Road will be transferred to Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. A nod. A quiet, satisfied exhale. The savings account, totaling. Daniel stopped listening. He already knew how this would go. He'd seen it coming the moment he walked into the room, and no one met his eyes. His brother Mark had been dead 8 months. Heart attack. Quick, they said. Painless. Daniel had been overseas when the call came. By the time he made it back, the funeral was already over. Closed casket. Everything handled. Everything decided. The lawyer flipped another page. The vehicle, a 2018 Ford. Daniel's gaze shifted to the window. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of heavy cloud cover that pressed down on everything. It reminded him of mornings before patrol, quiet, tense, like something was waiting. A chair leg scraped. Then silence. The lawyer paused, glancing up briefly before looking back down. One remaining asset.
As you can see right here,
No one moved. No one seemed particularly interested. Daniel felt it before he heard it. The subtle shift in the room. Bruno's ears lifted, just slightly. The lawyer reached into a small envelope and slid something across the polished wood table. It made a soft sound as it moved. Not loud, but it cut through the silence. It stopped in front of Daniel. A key. Brass. Old. Heavier than it looked. That's yours, the lawyer said. No explanation. No build-up. Just that. Daniel didn't reach for it right away. He looked at it first, eyes narrowing just a fraction, like he was assessing something in the field. Wait. Purpose. Intent. Across the table, Mark's wife, Eleanor, folded her hands neatly in her lap. Her expression didn't change. If anything, it relaxed. It's a cabin, she said, out in West Virginia. Something Mark's father left behind years ago. A faint smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. It's been appraised, she added. $3. A quiet chuckle came from somewhere to her right, quickly stifled but not fast enough. Daniel finally reached forward. The key felt cold when it touched his palm. Solid. Real. Not like the rest of this. He turned it once between his fingers. No label. No tag. Just worn metal and small scratches along the shaft, like it had been used more than anyone in this room cared to admit. Bruno lifted his head now, amber eyes tracking Daniel's hand. The dog's ears stood fully upright, body still, alert. Daniel closed his fingers around the key. The lawyer cleared his throat again. That concludes the distribution. Chairs shifted, papers gathered. The room began to move again, like something had been released. No one looked at Daniel. Not when he stood. Not when he stepped back from the table. He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Bruno rose with him, silent and steady, falling into place at his side without command. As Daniel turned toward the door, he paused for just a second. The air felt off. He couldn't explain it. Just a flicker. The same feeling he'd had before things went wrong in places he tried not to think about anymore. He glanced once over his shoulder. No one was watching him. Still, Bruno let out a low, almost inaudible rumble. Daniel pushed the door open and stepped out into the hallway. The sound of the office faded behind him, replaced by the hollow echo of his own footsteps. The key pressed into his palm, edges biting just enough to remind him it was there. $3. He slipped it into his pocket. Bruno stayed close, brushing lightly against his leg as they walked. Neither of them looked back. Outside, the sky hadn't changed. Still gray, still heavy. Daniel paused at the curb, scanning the street without thinking. A car passed. Another idled at the corner. Nothing unusual. Still, he exhaled slowly, steadying his breath. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than the dog. Bruno looked up at him, waiting. Daniel's hand rested briefly on the dog's head. "Let's go see what they didn't want." Bruno didn't move at first. He looked back toward the building. Just for a second. Then he turned and followed. The parking lot felt too open. Daniel didn't rush. He never rushed. He scanned the line of cars, the reflections in their windows, the movement at the far corner where a delivery truck idled longer than it needed to. Nothing stood out. That didn't mean much. Bruno stayed tight to his left side, shoulder brushing Daniel's leg with each step. Not nervous, not excited, just alert. Daniel unlocked the truck and paused before getting in, eyes sweeping the street one more time. Old habit, one he hadn't been able to shake since coming back. "Clear," he muttered under his breath. Bruno jumped into the passenger seat in one smooth motion. Daniel slid behind the wheel, shut the door, and for a moment, everything went quiet. Too quiet. He turned the key. The engine coughed once, then settled into a low, steady rumble. The sound grounded him, brought him back. He pulled out without looking back again. 3 hours later, the city was gone. So were the road signs. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely near his thigh, fingers tapping once every few seconds, counting without realizing it. The GPS screen had gone blank 20 miles ago. No signal, no route, just trees. Tall, narrow, endless trees pressing in on both sides of the road. The pavement had turned to gravel, then to something rougher, uneven. The truck shifted under him as tires rolled over loose stone. Bruno hadn't laid down once. His head stayed up, nose slightly lifted, drawing in the air through the cracked window. Every now and then, his ears would twitch toward something Daniel couldn't hear. "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "I feel it too." A sharp crack echoed behind them. Daniel's foot hit the brake before his mind caught up. The truck jolted slightly as he checked the rearview mirror, heart already climbing. Empty road. No headlights. No dust trail. Just the sound of the engine and the wind through the trees. Backfire. Probably. He exhaled slowly, easing his grip on the wheel. His knuckles had gone white without him noticing. Bruno let out a low sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. More like a warning held back. Daniel didn't answer. He just drove. The light started to fade faster than it should have. Clouds rolled in low over the mountains, turning the sky a dull gray that swallowed the last of the sun. Shadows stretched across the road, breaking it into pieces. Daniel leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. The terrain shifted here. Steeper inclines, tighter turns. No guardrails, no markings. The kind of place you didn't come unless you meant to, or unless someone sent you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the key, holding it between two fingers for a second, before setting it on the dashboard. It slid slightly with the movement of the truck, catching the last bit of light. $3, he muttered. Bruno's eyes flicked to it, then back to the road. The road narrowed again. Branches scraped along the side of the truck with a dry, dragging sound. One snapped sharply against the roof, loud enough to make Daniel flinch. For a split second, the sound changed. Not branches. Gunfire. Sharp. Close. Too close. His body reacted before his mind did. Daniel ducked slightly, one hand tightening on the wheel, the other instinctively reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. The truck swerved just enough to kick up gravel at the edge of the road. Then it was gone. Just wind. Just trees. Daniel blinked hard, forcing the image out. His breathing came in short bursts, chest tight, vision narrowing. "Stay with me," he said under his breath. Bruno shifted closer, pressing his weight against Daniel's arm. Solid. Real. Daniel focused on that. On the road. On the sound of the engine. The moment passed. It always did. They crested a small rise, and then the trees opened. The clearing sat quiet, like it had been waiting. The cabin stood at the far edge, backed against a line of darker woods. It wasn't big. One level, sloped roof, no lights, no movement. Daniel slowed the truck, letting it roll forward the last few yards before stopping completely. He didn't get out right away. He watched, counted, 5 seconds. 10. Nothing moved. No tracks in the dirt that he could see from here. No broken branches. No signs of recent use. Still, something felt off. Bruno let out a soft huff, eyes locked on the cabin. His body had gone still again, muscles tight under his coat. Daniel reached for the door handle, then stopped. Wait. He leaned forward slightly, scanning the edges of the clearing. Tree line, roof line, windows, looking for reflection, for movement, for anything that didn't belong. Nothing. He opened the door slowly. The air outside was colder than it should have been. Bruno jumped down first, landing lightly, then immediately turning in a slow circle. Nose down, then up, testing the air. Daniel stepped out after him, boots crunching against gravel. The silence here was different. Not empty. Held. He closed the truck door without slamming it. "All right," he said quietly. Bruno moved a few steps ahead, then stopped, looking back once before continuing toward the cabin. Daniel followed, each step measured, eyes never settling in one place for too long. The cabin didn't look abandoned. That was the first thing that hit him. No broken windows, no sagging roof, no rot creeping up the walls. Just stillness, like it had been left alone on purpose. He reached the porch steps and paused again, hand brushing the railing lightly. Solid. No give. Bruno was already at the door, waiting, not scratching, not barking, just waiting. Daniel stepped up beside him, the key already in his hand. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel reached forward and slid the key into the lock. It turned too easily. No resistance, no grind of rust. Just a smooth, quiet click, like it had been used yesterday. Daniel didn't open the door right away. His hand stayed on the knob, still, listening. Nothing inside. No shifting wood. No small animal scrambling. No echo of movement where there shouldn't be any. Bruno stood close, body angled toward the doorway, ears forward, tail low but steady, waiting again. Not impatient, not unsure, just certain. Daniel pushed the door open. It moved without a sound. Cool air drifted out, dry and faintly sharp, carrying the scent of wood. Clean wood, not rot. No mildew, no decay. That was wrong. He stepped inside. The floor didn't creak. His boots landed on solid boards, smooth underfoot, not warped, not soft. He paused just inside the doorway, letting his eyes adjust, scanning corners first. Always corners. One room, simple layout, bed frame against the far wall, a table beneath a window, a stone fireplace, dark and unused. But everything was intact. Too intact. Daniel moved slowly, each step placed with intention, eyes tracking the lines of the walls. The panels were fitted tight, grain running clean from one board to the next, like they'd been cut as a single piece. No nails. He crouched slightly, running his fingers along the seam between two boards. Not even a gap. Dovetail, he murmured. Bruno padded past him, nails clicking once against the floor before going quiet again. The dog moved deeper into the room, then stopped. Just like before. Same posture, same stillness. One spot. Daniel straightened and followed his gaze. The corner of the room near the base of the wall. Nothing obvious. No discoloration. No loose board. Just the same clean, perfect wood. Bruno didn't move. Daniel approached slowly, angling his body so he could see both the door and the window in his peripheral vision. Old instinct. Never turn your back on an unknown space. He reached the spot and looked down. The floorboards here were identical to the rest. But something felt off, not visible. Felt. He shifted his weight slightly. Solid. Again. Same. Daniel exhaled quietly and stepped back. Not yet, he said under his breath. Bruno glanced at him, then back at the floor, unwilling to leave it completely. Daniel let him be. He moved through the rest of the cabin, checking everything the way he used to clear rooms. Slow, methodical, no assumptions. The bed frame caught his attention next. Heavy wood, handcrafted. The joints were tight, seamless. No screws, no brackets. Just interlocking pieces that held under their own precision. He pressed down on it lightly. Didn't shift. Didn't even sound. The table near the window was the same. Smooth surface, edges worn just enough to show use but not age, not neglect. Someone had built this. Not fast, not cheap. Built it to last. Daniel stepped back, turning slowly in place, taking it all in. This wasn't a forgotten cabin. This was something else. Something maintained without being touched. Bruno let out a low sound. Daniel's head snapped toward him instantly. The dog had shifted position, nose pressed close to the floor now, inhaling sharply. Then again. Focused. Daniel moved back toward him, slower this time. What is it? Bruno didn't look up. He placed one paw on the floor and scraped lightly. Not digging. Testing. Daniel crouched beside him, eyes narrowing as he leaned in. Still nothing obvious. But up close. There. A line. So fine it disappeared unless the light hit it just right. A seam. Perfectly straight. Daniel reached out and ran his fingertip across it. Smooth. Too smooth. He pressed down. Nothing. Pressed harder. Still nothing. Bruno's paw tapped again, more insistent now. Daniel glanced at him, then back at the floor. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I see it." He stood, scanning the room again, slower this time, more deliberate. If there was one seam, there could be more. Walls, floor, fireplace. Everything suddenly felt less like a cabin, and more like something assembled with purpose. Outside, the wind shifted. A low gust moved through the trees, brushing against the cabin walls with a hollow sound. For a split second, it changed. The sound twisted in his head. Rotor blades. Distant. Closing in. Daniel's body locked. His breathing stopped. The room wasn't a cabin anymore. It was dust. Heat. Noise. Someone shouting over comms. Static cutting through. He blinked. Hard. The sound snapped back to wind. Just wind. He stepped back quickly, hand bracing against the wall, grounding himself in the solid wood beneath his palm. Bruno pressed into his leg again, firm, steady. Daniel exhaled slowly, forcing his breathing down. "Not here," he muttered. "Not now." The moment passed. It always passed. He looked down at the seam again, then around the room, then back at Bruno. The dog hadn't moved from that spot. Daniel nodded once. "All right," he said quietly. He walked back to the door, stepping out onto the porch just long enough to grab the knife from his truck. When he came back in, the cabin felt different, not empty anymore. Waiting. Daniel knelt beside the seam again, blade angled carefully at the edge. He paused, listened. Nothing. He slid the tip into the line and applied pressure. The wood didn't resist. It shifted, just slightly. Enough. Bruno's ears shot forward. Daniel froze, holding the position. Then slowly, he pressed again. The panel moved. Not much. Just enough to break the illusion that the floor had always been whole. Daniel froze, every muscle tightening at once. He listened. No shift in the walls. No hollow echo beneath. No mechanism snapping into place. Just silence. Bruno stepped closer, nose hovering inches above the opening, breath slow but focused. He didn't bark, didn't scratch again. He waited. Daniel slid the knife deeper into the seam and applied steady pressure. The wood lifted with a soft, controlled release, like it had been designed to open without resistance. That was wrong. Nothing built out here should move this clean after years of neglect. The panel rose just enough for him to get his fingers under it. He set the knife aside and gripped the edge, lifting carefully. The section came free, not nailed down, not glued. Placed. Daniel set it aside without taking his eyes off the dark space beneath. A metal surface caught the faint light from the doorway. Box. Military issue. He knew it before he touched it. The edges were reinforced. Corners worn but intact. The kind of container meant to survive transport, impact, time. Bruno leaned in closer, nostrils flaring, then pulled back slightly, ears flicking. Not fear, recognition. Daniel reached down and brushed dirt from the top. His fingers paused when they hit the surface. Cold, even through the thin layer of dust. Stamped markings, faded but still there. He couldn't read all of it yet. But he didn't need to. He'd seen enough gear in his life to know this didn't belong in a forgotten cabin in the mountains. He wrapped his fingers around the handle and lifted. Heavier than it looked. He set it on the floor beside the opening and crouched over it, running his thumb along the latch. Locked. Of course it was. Daniel sat back slightly, scanning the room again. Door, window, walls, everything still. But the feeling had changed. The cabin wasn't empty anymore. It was holding something. Bruno shifted suddenly. Daniel's head snapped up. The dog wasn't looking at the box. He was looking at the door. Still as stone. Daniel followed his gaze. Nothing moved outside. But something lingered. The air pressed differently. Daniel rose slowly, stepping away from the box. He moved toward the door, each step quiet, controlled. He didn't go all the way out, just enough to look. The clearing stretched the same as before. Trees, their toits at the edge, shadows deepening as the last light faded. No movement, no sound. Still, Daniel crouched slightly, eyes narrowing as he scanned the ground near the truck. Tracks, faint, hard to see in the dim light, but they were there. Fresh. Not from his truck, different tread. Bruno let out a low, controlled growl. Daniel straightened, jaw tightening. "Yeah," he said quietly. He stepped back inside and closed the door without slamming it. The latch clicked softly into place. Then he turned back to the box. No hesitation this time. He dropped to one knee and pulled the knife back into his hand, angling it toward the latch. He didn't rush it, didn't force it. He worked the blade into the seam, applying pressure in small, precise movements. The metal gave just enough. A dull snap. The latch loosened. Daniel froze again, listening. Nothing. He flipped the latch open, then the second. The lid resisted for half a second before lifting with a slow, controlled creak. Inside. Not weapons. Not supplies. Paper. Stacks of it. Folded maps. Plastic sleeves. Markings in ink that had faded but not disappeared. Coordinates. Grids. Symbols. Daniel's breath slowed, but his focus sharpened. He reached in and pulled one sheet free, unfolding it carefully. The layout wasn't civilian, not even close. Sector lines, entry points, elevation notes, and one marking repeated more than the others. A designation. LZ. Daniel stared at it for a long moment. Then at the cabin. Then back at the map. This wasn't just a cabin, he murmured. Bruno stepped closer, pressing against his shoulder, eyes still flicking toward the door every few seconds. Daniel folded the map halfway, then stopped. There was more beneath it. He shifted the top layer aside. A smaller pouch, sealed, different material. He picked it up, weighing it in his hand. Something inside shifted. Not heavy, but important. He set it aside for the moment and looked back at the open floor. The empty space where the box had been. Too clean. Too deliberate. This wasn't storage. This was placement. A drop. Daniel leaned back slightly, mind already moving ahead of the moment. If there was one compartment, there were more. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing against the cabin walls in a low, steady sweep. Bruno's growl deepened. Daniel didn't look up this time. He already knew. They weren't alone out here. Daniel didn't move for a long moment. He stayed kneeling beside the open compartment, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the metal box, the other still holding the map. His breathing slowed on purpose. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, forcing his body to settle before his mind ran too far ahead. Bruno stood rigid beside him, eyes locked on the door, body angled just enough to put himself between Daniel and whatever might come through it. Good instinct. Daniel folded the map carefully and slid it back into the box. No need to rush, no need to panic. Panic got people killed. He reached for the smaller sealed pouch and turned it over in his hand. Fabric. Reinforced edges. military grade. He hesitated for half a second, then opened it. Inside, a flashlight. Compact. Old model. Scratched, but intact. Daniel stared at it, thumb brushing over the worn casing. Then it hit him. Not just a flashlight. Standard issue from years back. Same type he'd carried. Same weight. Same feel. His jaw tightened. "This isn't random," he muttered. Bruno shifted again, stepping closer to the door. Daniel closed the pouch and set it aside. His eyes moved back to the maps, then to the open floor, then to the walls. Pattern. There was always a pattern. He stood slowly, joints stiff from the long drive, and began moving through the cabin again. Slower now, more deliberate. He checked the walls first. Ran his fingers along the panels, feeling for seams like the one in the floor. The wood was too perfect, too consistent, every joint placed with intention. He moved to the fireplace. Stone, solid, cold. But even there, he leaned closer. A line, faint, almost invisible where one stone met another. Daniel didn't touch it yet. He stepped back instead, scanning the entire structure again, this time not as a shelter, but as a system. Entry points, hidden storage, redundancy, like a forward operating site, or a cache. Bruno's growl broke the silence. Daniel turned instantly. The dog had moved to the window now, head low, eyes fixed on something outside. Daniel crossed the room in 2 quiet steps and stopped just short of the glass. He didn't stand in front of it. Stayed to the side, peering out at an angle. The clearing was darker now, shadows stretching longer, deeper. But there, movement. Not obvious, not direct. A shift in the tree line. Something that didn't belong. Daniel's hand tightened. "Contact," he whispered under his breath. Bruno's ears snapped forward. The shape moved again. Gone. Daniel waited. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. He stepped back from the window, mind already working. If someone had been watching, they'd seen the truck, seen the lights, maybe more. Daniel turned toward the door, then stopped himself. No sudden moves. He needed more information. He went back to the box, crouching again, pulling out another map. This one more detailed. Topography, elevation. And there, a mark just off the cabin. Not on it, behind it. A small symbol, circled twice. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Bruno. The dog turned instantly. Daniel tapped the map once, then pointed toward the back wall. Bruno didn't hesitate. He moved, fast. Out of the room, through the back corner where the wall met the floor. Daniel followed, grabbing the flashlight on instinct, thumb pressing the switch. The beam cut clean through the dim light. They stepped outside through a narrow back door Daniel hadn't even noticed before. The air hit colder back here. The ground sloped slightly downward, softer underfoot. Bruno was already ahead, nose low, moving in tight arcs. Tracking. Daniel kept his light low, sweeping the ground instead of the trees, looking for disturbances. There. Fresh soil. Darker than the rest. Bruno began to dig. Not wild, not frantic. Controlled. Focused. Daniel crouched beside him, brushing dirt away with his hands. The soil came loose too easily, too recently disturbed. His fingers hit something solid. Metal. Flat. He cleared more dirt, revealing the edge of a plate. Not wood. Steel. Daniel sat back on his heels, pulse steady but elevated. Another compartment. But this one. Bigger. Deeper. Bruno stepped back slightly, giving him space, but his body stayed tense, ready. Daniel ran his hand across the surface. cold, real. He followed the edge until his fingers found a recessed handle. His grip tightened. Behind him, somewhere in the trees, a branch snapped, close. Bruno spun, teeth bared now, a full growl ripping from his chest. Daniel didn't turn, not yet. His eyes stayed on the handle. His voice came low. Stay. Bruno didn't move, but the growl didn't stop. Daniel pulled. The metal didn't give. Locked. He glanced down at the flashlight in his hand, then back at the map, then at the steel plate beneath his fingers. Whatever was down there wasn't meant to be found easily, and someone else knew it was here. Daniel didn't turn right away. His hand stayed on the cold steel plate, fingers wrapped around the recessed handle, feeling the resistance in it. Locked. Solid. Built to stay closed. Behind him, the forest held its breath. Bruno's growl deepened, low and steady, the kind that didn't warn. It measured. Daniel let go of the handle. Slowly. He stood, every movement controlled, and only then turned his head just enough to scan the tree line. Nothing obvious. No silhouette. No movement. But something had shifted out there. He could feel it. Same way he used to feel it before an ambush. Not sight. Not sound. Just pressure in the air. Like the world had tilted half a degree off center. Daniel stepped back from the steel plate. Not here, he whispered. Bruno didn't argue. The dog stayed between Daniel and the trees as they moved, body angled, ears tracking every sound. They didn't rush back to the cabin. They moved quiet, measured. Each step placed. Daniel didn't look back again. The drive into town the next morning felt longer than it should have. Daniel hadn't slept. Not really. Every time his eyes closed, the sound came back. Rotor blades. Distant at first, then closer, louder. The thump, thump, thump filling his chest until he couldn't breathe. He'd sat up before it peaked, every time. Bruno never left his side. Now the truck rolled down the narrow road, tires crunching gravel, trees thinning as the land opened up into something resembling civilization. A gas station, a diner, a hardware store with faded paint and a crooked sign. Daniel parked without cutting the engine right away. He watched, counted. A man stepped out of the diner, lit a cigarette, didn't look twice at the truck. A pickup drove past slow local plates, nothing out of place. Still. Bruno gave a soft huff. Daniel nodded once. Yeah. He killed the engine. The bell over the hardware store door jingled as he stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Wood, oil, dust, real things. Behind the counter stood an older man, late 60s maybe, thick shoulders gone slightly soft with age, but his stance still carried something else, something trained. The man looked up, eyes sharp, not curious, assessing. Daniel recognized it instantly. Morning, the man said. Daniel gave a slight nod. Morning. Bruno stayed close, scanning the room once before settling near Daniel's leg, though his ears never dropped. The man's gaze flicked to the dog, then back to Daniel. Not from around here. Not a question. Daniel walked a few steps inside, glancing at the shelves, giving himself a reason to stand there. No. You're up on the ridge, the man said. Daniel stopped. Didn't turn yet. Then slowly, he faced him. That obvious? The man leaned one arm on the counter. Only one road leads up there, and nobody's used it in years, until yesterday. Silence stretched. Daniel stepped closer. Name's Daniel. The man nodded. Walter Briggs. They shook hands. Firm, Measured. Walter's grip tightened just enough to confirm what Daniel already suspected. Military. Former. Daniel let go first. You served, Walter said. Yeah. Where? Daniel hesitated. Afghanistan. Walter nodded once. Figures. No follow-up. No questions. Just understanding. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded map, placing it on the counter without saying anything. Walter didn't touch it right away. He just looked at it. Then at Daniel. Then back at the map. Slowly, he unfolded it. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Where'd you get this? He asked. Daniel didn't answer. Walter exhaled through his nose, folding the map halfway again. Some land ain't land, he said quietly. It's a cover. Daniel leaned slightly forward. For what? Walter shook his head. Doesn't matter what it was. What matters is people remember. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What kind of people? Walter glanced toward the window, then back. The kind that don't forget something valuable just because it's been buried a while. Bruno shifted, low growl building again. Daniel didn't look at him. What do they want? He asked. Walter met his eyes directly now. Depends on what you've already found. Silence again. The air in the store felt heavier. Walter folded the map and slid it back across the counter. You got a vehicle follow you up there yesterday? He asked. Daniel didn't answer. Didn't need to. Walter nodded once. Thought so. He stepped away from the counter, grabbing a small box from a shelf behind him and setting it down in front of Daniel. Flashlight batteries. You're gonna need them. Daniel looked at the box, then back at Walter. I didn't ask for these. Walter shrugged slightly. Didn't say you did. A beat passed. Then Walter leaned in just a little. Don't turn your lights on at night unless you have to, he said. And don't assume you're the only one watching the tree line. Daniel held his gaze. Appreciate the advice, Walter nodded. Just passing it along. Daniel picked up the batteries, slipped them into his pocket. As he turned to leave, Walter spoke again. Hey. Daniel paused at the door. If that place gave itself to you, Walter said, there's a reason. Daniel didn't respond. He stepped outside. The sky had cleared slightly, but the air felt colder. Bruno stopped at the edge of the lot, head turning toward the road. A black SUV rolled past. Slow, too slow. The windows were tinted dark. Daniel didn't move, didn't follow it with his eyes. But Bruno did, every inch of it, until it disappeared around the bend. Daniel opened the truck door. Yeah, he said quietly. They remember. Daniel didn't start the engine right away. He sat there, hands resting on the wheel, eyes forward but unfocused, replaying the movement of that black SUV in his head. The speed, the angle, the way it didn't belong on that road. Bruno let out a low breath through his nose, still watching the direction the SUV had gone. Daniel finally turned the key. The engine came alive, steady and familiar, something he could control. He pulled out of the lot without hurry, merging onto the narrow road that led back toward the ridge. No sudden acceleration, no sharp turns. Just another truck leaving town. But his eyes never stopped moving. The climb back up felt different. Same road, same trees, same broken gravel. But now it was active. Daniel noticed things he hadn't before. A branch bent at an angle that didn't match the wind. Loose gravel pushed aside near a curve. Tracks. Not fresh enough to still be soft, but recent. Bruno picked up on it too. He shifted in the seat, nose pressed close to the open window, drawing in the air in short bursts. His body stayed tense, ready. "They've been up here," Daniel said under his breath. No answer. Didn't need one. By the time the cabin came into view, the light had started to fade again. Daniel slowed the truck before reaching the clearing, letting it roll the last stretch without engine noise. Tires crunching softer this time. He stopped short of the open space, waited, listened. Nothing. Bruno didn't move. Daniel reached over and killed the engine. Silence dropped heavy around them. Then, a faint sound. Metal. Not loud, but not natural either. Daniel's head turned slowly toward the cabin. "Stay," he whispered. Bruno didn't argue. Daniel opened the door carefully, stepping out without letting it slam. His boots touched the ground light, controlled. He didn't go straight in. Instead, he moved along the edge of the clearing, keeping the cabin in view but never approaching it directly. Using the trees, using shadow. Old habits, survival habits. He circled wide, eyes scanning for movement, for angles, for anything out of place. The truck sat alone where he'd left it, but near the far edge, tracks. Clearer now. Different tread from his own. Deeper. He crouched briefly, running his fingers across the dirt. Still fresh. Bruno appeared at his side without being called, silent as a shadow. His nose hovered just above the ground, following the line of tracks before lifting toward the cabin. Daniel nodded once. "They didn't stay long," he said. "Just checked." Bruno's ears twitched, then snapped forward. Daniel followed his gaze. The cabin door. Slightly open. Just a few inches. It hadn't been like that. Daniel felt his chest tighten, not from fear, something colder. Calculation. He moved closer now, slower, lowering his center of gravity as he approached. One step at a time. No rush. The porch creaked under his weight. He froze, waited. Nothing answered. He reached the door and stopped to the side, back against the wall, giving himself a narrow angle inside. Dark. Still. But something had changed. He could feel it. Bruno stood just behind him, body tight, ready to move. Daniel pushed the door open with 2 fingers. It swung inward silently. The room looked the same. At first, table, bed, fireplace. But the air, disturbed. Daniel stepped inside, eyes sweeping fast now, picking up details. The floor panel, open. The metal box, shifted. Not how he left it. Daniel moved forward quickly, dropping to one knee beside it. The maps were still there. The pouch, untouched. But the way they were stacked, wrong. Someone had opened it, looked inside, closed it again. Bruno let out a sharp, low growl. Daniel didn't look up. His mind was already moving ahead. "They didn't take anything," he said quietly, which meant they were coming back. A sound outside cut through the silence. Gravel, light, controlled steps. Not an animal, human. Bruno reacted instantly. He moved in front of Daniel, body low, teeth bared now, no longer holding the sound back. Daniel stood in one motion, grabbing the flashlight and slipping it into his belt. His eyes moved to the door, then to the window, then back. Angles, distance, options, another step outside. Closer now. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay close." Bruno didn't move. The shadow passed the window, too fast to see clearly. Daniel shifted position, lining himself with the wall beside the door, body angled, ready. The handle moved, just slightly, then stopped. Silence. Daniel didn't breathe. Bruno's growl filled the room, low and steady, vibrating through the floor. The handle twitched again. Then, whoever was out there, let go. Footsteps retreated. Fast this time. Not careful anymore. Daniel moved to the door, stepping out onto the porch just in time to see movement at the edge of the trees. A figure. Gone in seconds. Too far to track. Too fast to chase. Daniel didn't follow. He stood there, watching the tree line long after the movement disappeared. Bruno came up beside him, still tense, still ready. Daniel exhaled slowly. "They're not guessing anymore," he said. His eyes moved back to the cabin, then to the ground behind it, to the place where the steel plate waited. Locked. Hidden. Not for long. Daniel didn't move from the porch right away. The trees had gone still again, like nothing had ever passed through them. No broken branches. No sound. No trace of the man who had been close enough to touch the door. But the cabin wasn't the same anymore. It had been opened. Seen. Daniel stepped back inside slowly, closing the door behind him with a soft click. His eyes went straight to the floor panel, then to the metal box. Nothing missing, which meant one thing. "They're not here to steal," he muttered. Bruno stood in the center of the room now, turning slowly, nose working the air, picking up what Daniel couldn't. "They're here to find something." Daniel grabbed the map again and spread it across the table. His finger traced the marked circle behind the cabin, then shifted to the structure itself. Then back again. Pattern. The cabin wasn't just a place. It was a marker. He looked up. "Let's finish this." Bruno didn't wait. He moved toward the back door immediately, muscles tight, ready. The ground behind the cabin felt colder. Not just the air, the earth itself. Daniel stepped carefully, scanning the tree line once more before dropping to one knee beside the steel plate. It was still half buried, dirt pushed aside from where he'd uncovered it before. Bruno positioned himself behind Daniel this time, not beside him. Guarding, watching the woods. Daniel reached for the recessed handle again. Locked. He exhaled slowly and pulled the flashlight free, angling the beam along the edges of the plate. There. A seam. Different from the cabin floor. This one was reinforced. And a slot. Small. Hidden in shadow. Daniel's hand moved to his pocket without thinking. The key. He pulled it out and held it under the light. Too big. Wrong shape. He turned it over, paused, then looked again at the slot. Not the shaft. The tip. He slid the end of the key forward, testing the alignment. It caught. Not fully, but enough. Daniel adjusted his grip, pushing it in slowly. Metal met metal. A soft click. Bruno's head snapped toward him. Daniel froze, listened. Nothing outside. But the lock. It shifted. He turned the key. Resistance. Then, release. A heavy internal mechanism moved beneath the plate, deep and controlled, like something waking up after a long time. Daniel pulled the key free and set it aside. His grip tightened on the handle. "Stay sharp," he said quietly. Bruno didn't move. Daniel pulled. This time, the plate lifted. Slow, heavy. Air rushed out from beneath it, cold and stale, carrying a scent that didn't belong to the forest. Metal, dust, time. Daniel held the plate open long enough to prop it with a rock, then leaned forward, angling the flashlight beam downward. Steps, steel, descending into darkness. Not a storage space, not a box, a structure. Bruno stepped closer, ears forward, eyes locked on the opening. He didn't hesitate, just waited for the signal. Daniel swallowed once, then moved. One foot on the first step, then the next. The metal creaked softly under his weight, echoing down into the space below. The light cut through the dark, revealing walls lined with reinforced panels. Old, but intact. This wasn't makeshift. This was built, purposefully, carefully. Daniel reached the bottom and stepped off the last rung. Concrete. Solid. The beam of light swept across the room. Shelves, crates, equipment, covered in dust, but not destroyed, not abandoned the way it should have been. Bruno came down behind him, landing silently, immediately turning to face the entrance above, guarding the exit. Daniel moved forward slowly, sweeping the light across the space. Then he saw it. A table, metal, centered in the room, and on it, files, stacks of them, neatly arranged, waiting. Daniel approached, each step measured. His hand hovered over the top folder before finally opening it. Inside, documents, stamped, marked, red ink, classified. His jaw tightened. He flipped a page. Coordinates, extraction routes, resource designations, and one word repeated again and again across multiple pages. Rare earth. Daniel's breath slowed. Not fear. Recognition. Flash. Light in his eyes. Too bright. Too sudden. The beam of his flashlight flickered, and for a split second, it wasn't a bunker. It was a convoy. Engines running. Men shouting. Move, move! Rotor blades cutting through the sky. The same symbols on crates. The same markings. Same mission. Daniel blinked hard. The room snapped back into place. Silent. Still. His grip tightened on the edge of the table. Not random, he whispered. Bruno shifted behind him. A low whine this time. Different. Daniel turned. The dog wasn't looking at the stairs. He was looking deeper into the bunker, toward the far wall. Daniel followed his gaze. The beam moved, stopped. There. Another door. Half hidden in shadow. Not on the map, not marked. Daniel's pulse picked up. Whatever this place was, they hadn't found all of it yet, and neither had he. Daniel didn't move for a moment. The beam of his flashlight stayed fixed on that second door at the far end of the bunker. It wasn't large, just a narrow steel outline, half hidden behind a row of old crates. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it, which meant it had been meant to be missed. Bruno let out a low, uneasy sound. Not fear. Warning. Daniel shifted his stance slightly, angling his body so he could see both the stairs behind him and the door ahead. Old training. Never commit fully to one direction. Stay with me, he said quietly. Bruno moved closer. Daniel stepped forward. Each step echoed softly against the concrete floor, the sound traveling farther than it should have in the still air. He kept the flashlight low, sweeping the ground, then lifting it just enough to track the edges of the room. The closer he got to the door, the colder the air felt. Not natural cold, sealed cold, the kind that stayed trapped. He reached the crates and stopped, running his hand along one of them. Dust coated his fingers, thick but undisturbed. No recent movement here. That meant whoever had been inside the cabin hadn't made it this far. Daniel stepped around the crates. The door stood in front of him now. No handle, no visible lock. Just a flat surface with a small panel set into the side. Electronic. Or used to be. Daniel crouched slightly, brushing away dirt from the panel. The casing was cracked, but intact enough to show its purpose. Keypad. Dead. He exhaled slowly. Figures. Bruno shifted again, stepping between Daniel and the rest of the room, his attention flicking constantly between the stairs and the dark corners. Daniel studied the door again. No keypad meant no code, but nothing built like this had only one way in. He stepped back, scanning the frame, edges, corners. Then, there, a thin line along the right side, almost invisible. Manual override. Daniel slid his fingers into the gap and applied pressure. Nothing. He leaned in closer, adjusting his grip, pulling harder. The door didn't budge, locked from the inside, or sealed. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not today," he murmured. He stood up slowly, turning back toward the main table. The files. That was the key. He walked back, flipping through them faster now, eyes scanning for anything that matched what he'd seen. Coordinates, designations, extraction zones. Then, a page near the middle. Stamped heavier than the rest, his flashlight steadied as he read. Resource classification, RE7, estimated yield, high-grade rare earth deposits. His eyes moved down. Projected valuation. He stopped. Read it again. Then once more. Exceeding 300 million. Daniel lowered the paper slowly. 300 million. For the land. For what was buried under it. Not the cabin. Not the maps. The ground itself. Bruno let out a sharp bark. Daniel spun. Too late. A sound exploded from above. Metal, the steel plate slammed shut. The bunker went dark. Total. Daniel's body reacted instantly, dropping low, one hand reaching for Bruno, the other gripping the flashlight as he slammed it back on. The beam flickered, then held. "Stay," he snapped. Bruno was already at his side, pressed tight, breathing fast now but controlled. Daniel swung the light toward the stairs, closed, sealed, no light from above, no sound. Just the echo of the impact still fading through the space. Daniel moved fast, crossing the room in seconds, reaching the base of the ladder. He grabbed the first rung and pulled himself up. The plate didn't move. Locked. From above. Daniel dropped back down, breathing harder now. Not panic. Focus. "They know," he said under his breath. Bruno let out a low growl, turning toward the walls again, searching for movement that wasn't there. Daniel forced himself to slow down. Think. There was always another way. There had to be. He turned back toward the bunker, toward the hidden door, toward the part they hadn't found yet. His grip tightened on the flashlight. "All right," he said quietly. "If that's how you want to play it." Bruno moved beside him, ready. Daniel stepped toward the sealed door again, because if they had locked him in, then whatever was behind that door was worth more than everything above it. Daniel stood still, letting that thought settle. Not panic. Not yet. Just clarity. They hadn't tried to kill him. They had sealed him in, which meant they needed something intact, something only he could reach. Daniel turned back toward the hidden door, running his hand along the seam again, slower this time. Not forcing it, feeling it. Bruno moved beside him, then suddenly stopped. His body stiffened, ears forward. Then, a sharp whine. Daniel turned. "What is it?" Bruno limped, just slightly. His front paw didn't land clean. Daniel dropped instantly, grabbing the dog's leg gently but firmly. There, a thin line of blood, not deep, but fresh. Daniel's eyes hardened. "They got close," he said quietly. Bruno didn't pull away. He stood still, breathing steady, eyes still tracking the room like nothing mattered more. Daniel tore a strip from his sleeve and wrapped the paw tight enough to stop the bleeding, not enough to cut circulation. "Stay with me," he said. Bruno leaned into him once, then turned back toward the door, guarding again. Always guarding. Daniel stood. Something shifted in his chest. Not fear, anger, controlled, focused. "They touched you," he muttered. His gaze moved to the hidden door, then to the walls, then back to the table. There was always another way. He moved fast now, pulling drawers open, checking beneath the table, behind the crates. His flashlight beam cut through dust and shadow, methodical, searching. Think. Whoever built this place had redundancy. Always. He moved back to the main files, flipping pages faster now. Scanning, not reading, looking for pattern. Then, a diagram. Small, tucked into the corner of a page. Not labeled, just lines, angles, a cross-section. Daniel's breath slowed. The bunker. But not just this room. A second chamber. Behind the wall. Connected. Hidden. His eyes moved to the hidden door again, then down to the floor, then to the side. There. A small vent near the base of the wall. Daniel crouched, brushing dirt away. Metal grate. Loose. Not sealed like the door. He pulled it free. Darkness beyond. Narrow. Too narrow for comfort, but passable. Daniel looked at Bruno. "You with me?" Bruno didn't hesitate. He lowered himself immediately, ready to crawl. Daniel nodded once. "All right." He dropped to his knees and slid into the opening, flashlight held low, body moving slow and controlled through the tight space. Metal scraped softly against his jacket. The air inside was colder, stale. He moved forward inch by inch until the tunnel opened slightly, enough to turn, enough to push through. Then, light, faint, different. Daniel pulled himself through the opening and dropped into the next chamber. He landed hard, rolling slightly to absorb the impact. Bruno followed seconds later, landing beside him, favoring his injured paw, but steady. Daniel brought the flashlight up. The beam revealed, not crates, not files, equipment. Modern, cleaner, maintained. Monitors, power units, sealed containers stacked along the walls. This wasn't abandoned. This was active, or had been recently. Daniel stepped forward slowly. One of the containers caught his eye. Different markings. Newer. He wiped dust from the surface. A label appeared beneath. Corporate. Not military, but tied to the same designation. RE7. Rare Earth Extraction. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't just old," he said quietly. "It's still running." A sound cut through the silence. Not from behind, not from the tunnel. Above, a muffled voice, then another. Bruno growled instantly. Daniel killed the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the room. They stood still, listening. Footsteps above, multiple, heavy. Then, a voice, clearer now, filtered through the structure. "Check below. He has to be down there." Daniel's pulse slowed. Not faster. Slower. Focused. He reached down, resting a hand lightly on Bruno's neck. The dog stilled instantly. Silent. Waiting. Daniel's eyes adjusted just enough to make out the shape of the second door in this chamber. Unlocked. Already open. He leaned close to Bruno, voice barely a breath. New route. Bruno shifted, ready. Above them, metal scraped. The bunker door. Opening. Daniel moved. Not fast, not loud, just enough. He slipped through the second doorway, one hand brushing the wall to guide himself in the dark. Bruno stayed tight at his side, favoring the injured paw but never slowing. Behind them, the sound of boots hit the metal stairs. 1, 2, 3. Measured. Professional. Not locals. Daniel paused just beyond the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the faint outline of the corridor ahead. Narrow, low ceiling. A service passage not meant for regular use. Good. That meant fewer angles. Easy, he whispered. Bruno's breathing steadied. Above them, voices echoed down through the structure. He's down here. Light it up. A beam of light cut through the main bunker room, spilling faintly into the corridor behind Daniel. He didn't look back. No reason to confirm what he already knew. They were inside. And they weren't leaving empty-handed. Daniel moved deeper into the passage, each step placed along the edge of the floor to minimize sound. The corridor bent slightly, then opened just enough to reveal a ladder at the far end. Up. Another exit. Daniel crouched briefly, checking Bruno's bandage, still holding. The bleeding had slowed. "You good?" he whispered. Bruno gave a small, steady exhale. That was enough. Daniel rose and moved to the ladder, testing the first rung before putting weight on it. Solid. He climbed, slow, controlled, every shift of weight deliberate. Bruno followed without hesitation, claws gripping metal, pulling himself up despite the injured paw. Halfway up, a sound below. "Over here!" Daniel froze. Light swept across the lower opening of the corridor. Too close. He climbed faster now, still silent, but pushing the limit. His hand reached the top, pressing against a hatch. Locked. Of course. He didn't stop. He shifted his grip, bracing one foot against the ladder and pushing hard against the hatch. It didn't move. Below, footsteps entered the corridor. "Check that passage," Bruno growled low. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not happening," he muttered. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the key again. The same key. The only key. He ran his fingers along the edge of the hatch, searching. There, a slot. Different angle. Hidden. He pushed the tip of the key in. It caught. Turned. A sharp click echoed through the metal shaft. Daniel pushed. The hatch gave. He forced it open just enough to pull himself through, then turned immediately, reaching down. Up! Bruno didn't hesitate. He jumped, catching the edge with his front paws. Daniel grabbed his collar and pulled, muscles straining as he lifted the dog through the opening. Bruno landed beside him, breathing hard but steady. Daniel slammed the hatch shut behind them. Locked it. The key turned once more. Silence. They were outside, but not at the cabin. Different side of the ridge. Higher. The trees were thicker here, the ground uneven and sloped. Daniel stood still for a moment, letting the air hit his face, letting his body catch up. Bruno moved ahead a few steps, then turned back, waiting. Always waiting. Daniel looked down at the key in his hand, then back toward the direction of the cabin. Voices echoed faintly through the trees now. Distant, but not gone. "They're still there," he said quietly. Bruno's ears flicked. Daniel exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering for the first time since the hatch had opened. He could leave. Right now. Walk down the ridge. Get to the truck. Drive until the road ended and keep going. No one would blame him. No one would even know. $300 million buried under that land, and people willing to kill for it. Daniel looked at Bruno. The dog stood there, steady, watching him, trusting him. The bandage on his paw had darkened slightly, but he didn't shift his weight away from it. Didn't complain. Didn't hesitate. Daniel's gaze drifted back toward the trees, toward the cabin, toward everything buried beneath it. Flash, light in his eyes again, men shouting, a voice over comms. "Leave it! We're pulling out!" He remembered that moment. The order, the choice, and the men who didn't make it back because someone decided it wasn't worth the risk. Daniel blinked. The memory faded. He looked at Bruno again, then at the ridge, then at the key. His fingers closed around it. "No," he said quietly. Bruno's ears lifted. Daniel nodded once. Not leaving. The wind moved through the trees, low and steady. Daniel turned back toward the cabin. "Let's finish it." Bruno didn't wait. He moved first, and Daniel followed. They didn't take the main path back. Daniel angled across the ridge, keeping elevation, using the slope to stay above the cabin. Old instinct. Never walk straight into a position someone else might still be watching. Bruno moved ahead, slower now but deliberate, picking his steps carefully. Even injured, he stayed sharp, nose catching every shift in the wind. Daniel stopped just short of the tree line overlooking the clearing. The cabin sat below, still, quiet, but not empty. A black SUV stood where his truck had been. Another vehicle parked just beyond it, half hidden behind brush. Two men moved near the porch, their posture loose but alert. Not locals. One of them stepped inside. The other stayed out, scanning the tree line without really seeing it. Daniel crouched low, eyes narrowing. "They think I ran," he said under his breath. Bruno stayed still, watching, waiting. Daniel's gaze moved to the ground behind the cabin, the steel plate, the hidden bunker beneath it. Then back to the men, then to the cabin itself. Something shifted inside him. Not anger, not fear. Something quieter. Final. He exhaled slowly and stood. No rush, no hesitation. He stepped out from the trees. Bruno followed. The man outside the cabin saw them first. His posture snapped tight instantly, hand moved, but stopped when he saw Daniel wasn't running. Daniel walked forward, steady, eyes locked on him. "Looking for something?" Daniel called out. The second man stepped out of the cabin, slower, more controlled, older, better trained. His eyes studied Daniel, then Bruno, then the ridge behind them. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "we were hoping you'd come back." Daniel stopped about 10 feet from them. "Close enough. Far enough." "You locked me in," Daniel said. The man gave a slight shrug. "Precaution." Daniel didn't respond. The wind moved through the clearing, brushing past them all. The older man stepped forward. "That property belongs to a corporation now," he said calmly. "What's underneath it isn't part of your inheritance." Daniel reached into his jacket slowly. The younger man tensed. Bruno's body lowered instantly, ready. Daniel pulled out the folded document from the bunker, held it up. "Everything down there says otherwise." The older man's expression didn't change. "Those are outdated." Daniel nodded slightly. "Maybe." He stepped forward one more pace. "Or maybe someone buried something and hoped nobody like me would ever find it." Silence stretched. The younger man shifted his weight. Bruno's growl rolled low across the ground. The older man looked at the dog, then back at Daniel. "You don't want this fight," he said. Daniel glanced down at Bruno. The bandage, the blood, the steady eyes that never left the men in front of them. Then back up. "No," Daniel said quietly. "I don't." He took another breath. Then, "But I'm not leaving." The words settled into the space between them. Heavy. Final. The older man studied him for a long moment. Then something changed. Not defeat. Recognition. He looked at the cabin, then back at Daniel. "This won't stay hidden," he said. Daniel nodded. "I know." The man exhaled once, then turned. No signal, no threat. He just walked back to the SUV. The younger man hesitated a second longer, then followed. Doors closed, engines started. The vehicles pulled away slowly, disappearing down the road without looking back. Daniel stood still until the sound was gone. Completely gone. Only then did his shoulders lower. Bruno stepped forward, leaning lightly against his leg. Daniel reached down, resting his hand on the dog's head. "Good work," he said quietly. The cabin stood behind them, the same as before. But not the same. Months later, the road to the ridge was no longer forgotten, not crowded, not marked, but known. The cabin had changed, not its structure, not its bones, but its purpose. The door stayed open during the day. Inside, the table held more than maps now, tools, coffee mugs, folded blankets. Voices came and went, quiet ones, men and women who moved like Daniel used to, some with dogs, some without. Bruno lay near the doorway most days, older now in how he moved, but still watching everything that passed the threshold. Still guarding. Daniel stood outside, looking over the ridge as the wind moved through the trees. No sudden sounds made him flinch anymore. No shadows pulled him back into something he couldn't control. Behind him, the cabin held, just like it had before he ever found it. Only now it held more. A place. Not for hiding something valuable, but for keeping something alive. Daniel looked down at Bruno. The dog lifted his head, meeting his eyes. Steady, unquestioning. Daniel gave a small nod. "Yeah," he said quietly. The wind moved again, and this time, he didn't brace for it. If this story meant something to you, I want to hear from you. Just type 1 in the comments if you believe loyalty, like Bruno's, still exists today. Or type 0 if you think people like Daniel are disappearing from the world. No long messages needed, just one number. And if you stayed all the way to the end, don't forget to hit subscribe, because there are more stories like this waiting for you. Stories about people who lost everything and found something even greater when they thought it was over. I'll see you in the next one.